Okay, so this video, if we look a little bit more carefully at the villi, so you kind of have the mucosa up here, but you have, this is what it looks like, okay? So there's, and again, with this, um, it's structure and function, okay? So we're really big on the structure and the function. So one is these curves increase the surface area, increases the rate of digestion. If you look on the epithelium here, right, they're one cell thick, right? Um, so again, that decreases the diffusion distance. The food only has to diffuse across that into the blood vessels. Um, if you look even closer onto here, you see the microvilli, right? Again, increased surface area, so even faster diffusion through there, okay? And these are the little microvilli. Um, right? Also, you'll see on here, if we zoomed in even closer, you would see proton pumps and transport proteins and everything on here that would allow molecules to go through also. Okay? If you looked inside this cell, you would see a whole bunch of mitochondria. The mitochondria is producing ATP. That's going to be needed for active transport. See, you can't escape any of this stuff we've learned. So lots of mitochondria, lots of active transport. If you look also a bit closer, you'll see the capillaries here. They're right underneath the surface of the skin. They're cross-linked here, so that's important also. But basically, they're very close to the epithelium. So again, that idea about diffusion distance, we're making it as short as possible, so we can have the speed of the diffusion. The speed of digestion, the speed of the absorption is what I'm really talking about. The speed of absorption can happen really quickly. Um, so the lacteal here is something we don't talk much about in this class, but the lacteal is part of the lymphatic system. And not only does this kind of part of the immune system function also, but this is also how kind of we can transport fat molecules and insoluble um, molecules around the body. So that kind of helps with that. So the lacteal is where basically the fats are going to be taken away after absorption. Okay? And then if you look at this under a microscope, you can Google this, you'll see millions of villi in the small intestine. It's an insane amount of numbers of villi. So again, that faster surface area for absorption. Okay? Um, Again, this is what we're talking about here is absorption. The previous video talked about digestion. After things are digested, this is where absorption takes place, and the walls of the capillary, particularly the villi, are where this is happening. Okay, so I hope that helps explain it. Let me know if you have questions. Is going to focus on the small intestine. So, if you look here, the small intestine itself is about 6 meters long or so. And what we're looking at here under a microscope is what we call a transverse section. So imagine you have your small intestine, right? This kind of long bit here. Um, and it's got the walls here running all the way through it. Now we're not zooming in here. Now this section is kind of a cut like this, right? So we're looking at that. We've opened it up here, and there's the small intestines here, and then we've just taken a small chunk of it here and magnified it on the microscope, okay? So I hope that gives you kind of some perspective of it. And we'll come back to this as we kind of talk about it. So what you kind of see here is, I'm going to highlight it, kind of this section here. There's another one here, another one here. Those are called the villi, okay? And then the equivalent down here is there. Obviously, these are a lot smaller. They're microscopic, but you get the idea. Um, so this is where absorption takes place. So food here in the lumen, right? The basically monomers here are basically absorbed into the small intestine. These go down here to these little red bits are the capillaries, and the capillaries are taken to the rest of the body. Okay, so this is the main job of these villi, is literally to absorb food. Okay, but meanwhile on here there are cells that are releasing endocrine glands, exocrine glands that are releasing enzymes into this duct, and they're into the lumen and helping to digest and so forth. Okay, so there's a couple of areas on this picture you need to be familiar with. Um, so kind of the first bit of that is what we call the mucosa. So if you zoomed in here a lot, you would see basically it's the thin layer on the outside, the innermost layer towards the lumen, and it contains a whole bunch of things there. The submucosa, which is B, is kind of this area here. It's a connective tissue that supports the mucosa and contains large veins and arteries, which give rise to the capillary bed. So you're seeing big veins here. There's little capillaries here, and again, the idea of all of these is taking blood away, taking blood to the other parts of the body. It's a big part of digestion. And then C, you see the circular muscles. Now, you know these are circular because they run up and down this way. They look kind of like villi, but they're on the outermost layer. They run up and down. And you remember, kind of looking at circular muscles, they contract to help push the food through, right? They keep the food from going backwards. Then right below that, the layer D here, let me highlight that. Right along here are the longitudinal muscles, okay? And always remember this because they look like they're actually really long. These look kind of short. These kind of go for a long way. They're layers like that. Remember, those are the ones that kind of scrunch up, so they contract this way to help kind of move the food along, while these contract this way, making that hole a bit smaller. So you can go back and see the other video on peristalsis if you're not familiar with that. And then if you look even closer here, this little section here is also called a microvilli. Okay, so this whole section here is a villi, and then on that villi you have microvilli. So here's me highlighting a whole bunch of microvilli, and these, like the villi, increase surface area. So the whole idea with that surface area is it increases the rate of digestion. Okay, so that's kind of electron micrograph of the small intestine, and